Who's this? Oh, I have a baby sister. Don't care!
I don't think there was a show from my childhood that was so universally beloved by most people at my school than the CW's Flash series. Maybe it was just me, but when I would go to school or I was talking with my friends and family or anything like that, the conversation would turn to what villain of the week did the Flash learn to stop. Overall, people really, really liked this series. And the same can be said on the internet as well. And I mean, who doesn't like the idea of the Flash? In any hypothetical situation when talking about superpowers, one of them usually is super speed. The other ones are probably invisibility or super strength or being able to walk through walls. But if you were cool, and I know you are because you're watching this channel, you probably pick super speed. You know what? Put in the comments why you didn't choose super speed when people talked about your favorite superpower or what superpower you'd have. Because I'm genuinely curious why you wouldn't choose the ability to freaking go insanely fast around the entire planet in the matter of seconds. That just seems like a no-brainer to me. Which is why I think a lot of people were so heartbroken when they realized that the Flash TV show was no longer good. You've seen video essay and commentary and more video essay about why the Flash fell from grace and why and when, and just a breakdown of the series as a whole and explaining the plot of the Flash. I'm not here to do that. I'm here because I have a different thesis. One that I think everybody agrees on to some extent, but to the level that I'm going to try and push might turn a few heads. But my thesis is this. There's only so much that you can do with a comic book character in the realm of movies and TV before they have to just go. And we'll talk about that. Hey, if you like when people talk about movies, TV shows, I'm a big fan of stories just in general, so I'll be talking about all types of stuff. I talked about FNAF a couple weeks ago, and that video blew up. Please be sure to subscribe. I like to talk about this type of stuff. I play games on here, I stream them, and we just have a good time. So if you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe, share with a friend. It really does mean the world. So I guess the best place to start with this is at the beginning of the show. If you are watching this video, I'm going to assume that you've seen The Flash. So what I want to do is I want to talk about what parts of this made a lot of people really excited and made people really happy with the way the show was going. First thing, boy goes super fast. I think that's very, very easy to break down. The main focus of the series was Barry Allen becoming the Flash and going very, very fast, fighting another dude that was also going very, very fast. It was new, it was crazy, it was fun, it was cool. I think a big thing that people forget when it comes to these stories and comic book movies and comic book TV shows is you can't just place a fan favorite character somewhere and just be like, here you go, please clap. You have to make a story that makes it so it makes sense that that person is there. Doomsday showing up at the end of Batman v Superman and killing Superman doesn't make sense for his character, doesn't make sense for any of the other characters. It does not complete anybody's arc. It does not solve any questions. It does not make sense for how the characters have been acting thus far. With a character like The Flash in the Flash TV show, it makes complete sense that Reverse Flash is there. He's almost always there, and he continues to be throughout the entire series. But it makes sense that he's there, especially in the first season. Because this entire time, Barry is trying to figure out who he is, what his life has become. And that all has to do with the kickstart that was his mom's death and his father getting arrested. So of course, if you want the catalyst for all this stuff to be there, you have to have somebody that is connected to that element of Barry as a prominent character in the series. And so Reverse Flash makes complete sense as a villain. Overall, Season 1 makes sense because Season 1 tells a complete narrative that makes sense through the character of Barry Allen and the Flash and his connection with the Reverse Flash. And honestly, there's only so many stories you can tell by converting comic book narrative to TV narrative. And that's really the aim that I'm going for here. When we look at Season 1 and Season 2, a lot of the narrative behind these characters and these stories fundamentally makes sense. And one of the reasons is because it's so simple. The story is centered on trying to make a compelling narrative for Barry. And when the focus is on that, it's very, very easy to make a comic book TV show. If you have, just for example, like 5 complex hero-villain narratives that you have to juggle at the same time, you're not going to have time in one season to do that, much less half of a season, which, I mean, nobody would dare to go that far. There's a reason why comic book arcs tend to last so long. It's because it makes sense for them to release stuff and have all of those issues come out. There's no time limit to completing an arc of a comic book. Well, there might be in like a business capitalism sense, but when it comes to actually releasing stuff and telling a complete story, there generally isn't a huge time limit. So you can have so much time to develop these characters, develop their reaction to those characters, and develop these really complex scenarios for these characters to deal with. You can't do that in a 20 episode season of a show. And so that's where the fundamental problem that the Flash TV show has to deal with comes in. How do you try to keep one character interesting for so long? And generally, they do a pretty good job for the first couple of seasons. But when you get to season 3 in particular, it starts to waver a little bit. Because at this point, you're on your 3rd iteration of Harrison Wells. Caitlin Snow has become Killer Frost, and Cisco Ramon has become Vibe. Now you're dealing with Savitar, who is another speed-based villain, and that villain does not satisfy all of the arcs that everybody else is going through. It just goes through Barry. So there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance where you're supposed to care more deeply about all of these new characters and all of these new avenues that they're trying to explore with these characters, but the central conflict hasn't changed. It's still just the Flash. And so that's why I think a lot of people say that this was the beginning of the end for the Flash, and I honestly stopped watching after this season before I watched the rest of the show to talk about this and to just talk about it with my friends and to understand what went wrong. So that's the first real thing that causes a rift. And you think that the solution would be to simplify, to make it more about the Flash. Because in reality, there's not going to be one threat that can satisfy all of these characters' baggages. And so you think the answer when you're the CW and you only have a limited amount of time in a season is to simplify and to not make it as complex and complicated as possible. But the CW decides to do a little trolling. People online were already talking about how it was getting too complex and too crazy. But then they just kept going, introducing new characters, introducing complex backstories for these new characters, making it less about the Flash and more about Team Flash, putting Iris at the center of a lot of different conflicts, putting Joe in pretty much every scenario possible, Cisco, Caitlin Snow, whoever the freaking light-based girl is, Allegra, that's her name, that's freaking her name. See, there's so many characters that I can't keep track. And yet we're supposed to care so deeply about all of these characters and their struggles, and you just can't. You don't have the time to develop these characters and their motives and their stories that you do in a comic book, that you do in a graphic novel. You have 22 episodes to make a compelling story. And you can't do that by just throwing characters, expecting people to clap, and then leave. This is why I think, here it comes, that Marvel fundamentally understands how to make superheroes work better than DC does. Iron Man had to die. I'm sorry. I think we all know that. But Iron Man had to die in Endgame. Because if you just kept on going with Iron Man over and over and over, it would have just gotten bad. It would have gotten stale. So Iron Man had to die. It made sense for the character. It made sense for the people around him. And on the opposite end, you can only make something like Avengers Endgame by having the time to put all of these complex characters together. Now, it's not the same as trying to do something in a TV show, but it's very similar. It's very close. Because you're both dealing with superheroes being put into a completely new environment than what it's normally used to. Normally you have literally like no time constraint when it comes to developing characters and developing stories. You can just keep on developing, keep on moving things. But with a movie or a TV show, you have a time restraint that you have to follow in order for the movie to be good, or for the TV show to meet the quota. So to have as ambitious of a crossover as Avengers Endgame, or even the first Avengers movie, took Marvel a long time. It took movies over and over and over, specifically focusing on individual characters in order for all of these characters interacting with each other, all these superheroes to interact with each other, to make sense. The issue with TV is you don't have a decade to do that. You can't even trust a lot of the time that you'll have a year to do that. And so The Flash is put at an immediate disadvantage to other superhero content. Because now you're trying to add more complexity, and you just can't. Based on the time constraints, the commitment that you have. So now you have to rush the complexity. And then it gets just so confusing, so crazy, that the typical fan can't even keep up anymore. You look at modern, current episodes of The Flash, and I couldn't even tell you who half of these characters are, their motives, where they are now, why I should care about them, and why the villain matters at all. And a lot of that are fundamental building blocks of a good story. And so now The Flash can't make a good story. Simply because of the medium that it is in, not being able to put all of this complexity out there. I loved the first few seasons of this show. They were great, compelling, interesting, fun. But now you're trying to do a comic book type narrative without having the advantages of comic books. So now it's rushed, unplanned, and difficult to work with. And I think that is why The Flash is dead. Or at least should be. And I think that's why superhero TV shows that try and do what The Flash has done aren't doing as well as people thought that they would. Or maybe I'm completely wrong and there's just a bunch of issues outside of that, and there definitely are. But I think that that was one of the most important facets of The Flash, having it be about The Flash, and now they can't really do that anymore, which is frustrating. But it's just a TV show at the end of the day, and I like to appreciate the parts of the show that I did. And the first few seasons of The Flash, I will continue to rewatch even to this day.